This is as close as we can get to the base of the World Trade Center. You can see the firemen assembled here, the police officers, FBI agents, and you can see the two towers. A huge explosion now, raining debris on all of us. We better get out of the way.
It is now my honor to sign into law the USA Patriot Act of 2001.
The Iranian Revolution of 1979 led to a shift in ideology towards religious anti-American extremism, resulting in the formation of Al-Qaeda in the 9/11 attacks.
In response to this, the USA Patriot Act was signed by George W. Bush on October 26, 2001, to protect the American people's right to safety by increasing surveillance and easing the flow of communication between government agencies.
From this, the Homeland Security Act of 2002 gave the Department of Homeland Security the legal responsibility of monitoring terrorism-related activity.
However, due to its possible violations of privacy rights, the Patriot Act has been challenged in several court cases, resulting in provisions being made in the 2015 revision of the Patriot Act. This revision, known as the USA Freedom Act, restricted the government's uncurbed access to private information.
While these acts have expired, many of the key provisions are still in effect today under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. In the 1970s, tensions rose between the U.S. and several regions in the Middle East. These tensions formed after Arab-Israeli conflict during Richard Nixon's presidency in the U.S., where Nixon provided military support to Israel. This led to the organizations of petroleum exporting countries imposing an oil embargo on the U.S., causing American oil prices to rise and an energy crisis to form.
We must face the fact that the energy shortage is permanent. There is no way we can solve it quickly.
In the late 1970s, the Iranian Revolution began due to the corruption and elitism of the Shah's policies and his push for Western-style modernization that undermined traditional Islamic values. The revolution brought a new regime that supported and backed many terrorist attacks and political violence, causing an increase in Islamic anti-American extremism. This includes the 1979 to 1980 hostage crisis and the attacks on the U.S. Embassy and Marine barracks in 1983, which led to the deadliest terrorist attacks on Americans until 9/11. The corruption that came from this caused many civilian protests.
On September 11, 2001, at 7:59 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11 took off from Boston, flying to Los Angeles with 5 Al-Qaeda members on board. At 8:15, United Airlines Flight 175 also takes off from Boston, flying to Los Angeles. Soon, ground personnel in Boston are informed that Flight 11 is being hijacked. After the hijacking, Mohammed Atta, an Al-Qaeda member on Flight 11, accidentally alerted air traffic control in Boston about the hijacking when attempting to use the public address system to talk to the passengers on plane.
Nobody move. Everything is okay. If you try to make any move, you'll injure yourself and the airplane. Let's stay quiet. We have some planes. Just stay quiet and you'll be okay. We're heading to the airport.
At 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11 crashed into the World Trade Center's North Tower. Shortly after, Flight 175 was hijacked. At 9:03 a.m., Flight 175 hit the South Tower. A total of 18,000 people were inside the World Trade Center before the plane struck. Both towers collapsed, resulting in about 3,000 deaths.
In the first few weeks after 9/11, several bills were introduced in Congress to change anti-terrorism laws. On September 19th, several senators and Attorney General John Ashcroft proposed the first draft of the Anti-Terrorism Act. While this wasn't passed, it was used as a foundation for the first version of the Uniting and Strengthening America, or USA Act, which was introduced to Congress on October 2nd. The first version contained many laws that increased broad surveillance and security. However, it didn't have any protections for civil liberties.
This was passed by the House on October 12th, but was canceled because the Senate couldn't agree upon it in time. Since this wasn't passed, several senators and representatives worked on writing a final version. The main writer, Representative Jim Sensenbrenner, incorporated the laws from the Anti-Terrorism Act and the USA Act, but made many provisions that protected civil liberties' privacy. The final draft gave the law enforcement and intelligence agencies increased broad surveillance powers, including roving wiretaps electronic surveillance, and expanded access to private phone records. Roving wiretaps allowed them to monitor multiple electronic devices of a suspect without multiple warrants for each device. This was introduced to the House on October 23rd as the Uniting and Strengthening America by providing appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorism, or a USA Patriot Act. The USA Patriot Act was rushed through Congress and was signed on October 26, 2001 by President George W. Bush. It was passed with only one opposing vote by Senator Russ Feingold.
It's essential not only to pursuing and punishing terrorists, but also preventing more atrocities in the hands of the evil ones. To find and stop and punish those who would do harm to the American people. It is now my honor to sign into law the USA Patriot Act of 2001.
Feingold opposed the act since it still heavily favored increasing broad surveillance powers over protecting rights, and because the powers it gave to the government could be abused.
Much controversy has formed over privacy concerns and alleged Fourth Amendment violations that the Patriot Act has committed. Concerns then led to many civilian protests. There were several court cases challenging the USA Patriot Act. These include ACLU v. USA, Mayfield v. United States, and Doe v. Holder. These cases mainly challenged its constitutionality.
After the first term of the Patriot Act expired, President Bush signed the Patriot Act Reauthorization Act. This reauthorization increased transparency, limited the use of national security letters, and provided tools to fight against the spread of methamphetamine. Although these were beneficial, many believe that the act still didn't provide enough protections for their civil liberties.
On January 9, 2014, the USA Freedom Act was introduced to the House of Representatives by Representative Jim Sensenbrenner and to the Senate by Senator Patrick Leahy. It was introduced since many of the key laws from the Patriot Act were set to expire in 2015. It passed through the House, but the Senate voted to block further debate until more civil protections were introduced. The act was pushed back until Section 215 of the Patriot Act expired. Section 215 was the main cause for much of the controversy. It allowed the National Security Agency to bulk collect telecommunication data.
On June 2, 2015, the USA Freedom Act was passed and signed into law by President Barack Obama. The USA Freedom Act prohibited many provisions from the Patriot Act. These include the bulk collection of phone records, roving wiretaps, and national security letters. It also ensured that the NSA couldn't collect phone records without court permission and could only obtain records on a specific person under investigation.
The USA Freedom Act extended the Patriot Act's provisions but introduced many new changes that heavily protected civil liberties and the right to privacy. On December 1, 2023, the USA Freedom Act expired. However, many of its key provisions are still in effect today under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act.
When the Freedom Act expired, these provisions were placed under the FISA in Section 702. Section 702 authorizes the targeted collection of foreign intelligence. It was most recently revised in the Reforming Intelligence and Securing America Act passed on April 22, 2024. This reauthorization imposed stricter requirements for obtaining data from U.S. citizens. This provides a strong protection for the U.S. citizens' right to safety and privacy.
The responsibility to uphold these rights are placed under the Department of Homeland Security, the National Security Agency, and the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court.